Heru Makiru, Heru Makiru, Heru Makiru, Heru Makiru, Duara Sara Set Heru, Om Tap Tap Tap. Okay, so let's see if we can get down to line, at least line 13 today. For doing classes for an hour, we're moving at a good pace, even though last week we had a review. So, doing all right. So, we are doing the teachings in the of the text of Heru Behudet. And we are trying to do the entire text. As we did as we're doing with the Abdua class on Friday nights. So in the Abdua class, we are now in the halfway point. And here we're just beginning. And it'll take us a while to get through it. But it won't seem that way because it's so dramatic. It's because it's a dramatic telling. And so now we're going to do a little review of line 10, and then we're going to try to move forward with it. So api or apa, men, and ra kahuti, jihuti, jeref, nura, nebu, neter, behudet, sab, and sokar. So we'll go directly to the philosophical narrative. The great winged disc of vital spiritual power within the stable abode of Ra Kahuti, the abode of spirit being. Jehuti proclaimed to all of the gods and goddesses who are derived from Ra, the creator spirit, that Behudet has been made dignified through his association and assimilation with Sokar, within the realm of Sokar. Thus, Behudet is the principle of soul that is transformed and rests within the netherworld, in the domain taken up by Asar, upon Asar's reconfiguration by Aset. Therefore, Behudet is the head of all divinities in his form of Sokar, of Amentet. So recall we did some extensive talk on the realm of Sokar. In the realm of Sokar is where Asar goes after he has led Heru into the plane of battle to engage with Set. And he goes there as Asar Sokar. And Asar Sokar is a hawk divinity, so is Heru, the Heru that is doing the battle against Aset. So it means that Heru Behudet has a hawk aspect. And here, the hawk aspect of Heru Behudet, that's not what we're looking at in this text, we're looking at the winged disc aspect of Heru. So it's very important to understand that all of these are aspects of the same Heru. They're basically aspects of the same divinity, because Ra is also a Hak divinity. So you have Ra, Heru Behudet, and you have Sokar, and you have Heru. And so Ra Heru Behudet is another form of Heru. So Ra Heru Behudet means a spirit manifesting through the horizon, the dual horizons. And so you have this principle that is coming through is the very same divinity. And the reason why that's important is because of what happens later in the text, even in line 11. So in line 11, it says, M, so M Mesu, Jetu Nu, Heru Behudet, S, Ramendra Nunubenti. The S means to cause, so cause establishment. So now going to go to the philosophical narrative. It is here in the land of Soka where Api was born. Api is the winged sun disk. There's another way of saying Heru Behudet. Clicked on the wrong one. So Api is another way of saying Heru Behudet. So Api is the symbol of Heru Behudet, Api the great winged disc. So the great disc with two wings, Api Heru Behudet says it is here where he was established in the consciousness of Ra with the powers of Benti. So now what's happening here is Benti is being introduced, and Benti is going to have a significant role to play in the understanding of who Heru Behudet is. So here in line 11, Benti is being introduced. Heru Behudet proclaims his higher consciousness as being one with creator consciousness of the creator spirit. So I wrote it as creator consciousness because of what Benti and what Heru Behudet is expressing as. So creator consciousness means the consciousness of spirit that creates, if you can follow that. And that is called Kepra, which is a form of Ra. So Ra is creator spirit, and Kepra is the aspect of that creator spirit that actually fulfills the creation. So here in line 11 again, this text, as we're going through it, is highly steeped in henotheism, or the henotheistic principle of divinity. It means that all of the gods and goddesses are forms and variants of each other, or variations of each other, not variants, variations. Thus, his expression is one of spiritual power, and this is the key in understanding Behudet is one of spiritual power. So there is something that is within you that you have to discover about yourself that is spiritual power. But you have to discover that. And the following lines is going to talk something of that, which is Benti consciousness. Is a consciousness of spirit through mind and illuminated intellect, which expresses as humility towards the divine. So remember this is an important, this is going to come up again shortly. It's very important, humility towards the divine. So now we're going into verse 12. Benti Heru Behudet Deba. So Deba is here. Determinative Nimu. Remen Punum Un Ra Hept. F her F. Here is Hept. Hept. And this is going to be a key term that we should add to our dictionary. But let's start at the beginning. So here the Deba, as you can see, here is a Benti. And here is Heru, here's his name as Behudet. So Heru Behudet. And you can see that he has the symbol of Nimu behind his name. So it means Heru of the city of Behudet. And then this term, Deba, also has the Nimu symbol as attached to it. And what that means is that the state of Deba is inherent within Behudet. And you'll see what I mean by that shortly. So Benti Heru Behudet, position, established existence of Ra, embraced his personality. And the term for embrace is Hept. Here's the H, there's the P, and there's the T, and the two arms. The two arms look like if you were going to like bend over and pick something up with both hands, like a pot. Looks like that. So you see the two arms is the determinative for the term Hept, which means to embrace. Now let's read the philosophical narrative. Benti Heru Behudet is a beautified aspect of Heru Behudet. So Benti is the beautified aspect of Heru Behudet. And so there's something of Benti that augments Heru Behudet. So Heru Behudet is inherent. Benti is inherent within Heru Behudet as a certain principle. that that adds to Behudet. You're putting it that way. It's not how it really is, but for the purpose of language, he adds to Behudet as that aspect of illuminating spirit that is inundating the essence of Heru Behudet. So that aspect, Benti is that aspect that is illuminating, that is the illuminating spirit of Heru Behudet. That is, I use the word inundating, but this is a hard concept to explain in English because it's not really inundating. You have to think about it as Heru Behudet has a certain essence, and that essence of Heru Behudet is its own spiritual illumination. And that spiritual illumination, that is the beautified aspect, and that is Benti. So Benti is within Heru Behudet as illuminating spirit. For example, there is light, let's say the light from a light bulb, and the light is being emitted. When you turn on the electricity, the light emits. And the light itself is its own illumination. So the light illuminates itself. It has its own inherent illumination. And that's Benti. Benti is the illuminating spirit within that spirit consciousness that is Heru Behudet. So it's a self-illuminating spirit being. And therefore, the term Deba means to be like to be in that position. And Remen means to be established. So Deba, to be established in that position. Thus, Heru Behudet is enfolded and inseparable from spirit essence. And that is the point, because that Benti is within Heru Behudet as its own spiritual essence, as its own spiritual beingness self. And therefore, Heru Behudet does not need an outside illuminator. It's its own illumination. You follow? So there's no outside illuminator. There's no outside entity or being that can come in and illuminate better. It has its own illumination, and that self-illumination is Benti. And therefore, the spirit being is self-luminous. It is not a reflection, but it causes all reflections. It is the source of all reflections. But it itself is not a reflection. And what are the reflections of spirit being? The gods and goddesses are all the reflections. But Behudet itself is not a reflection because it is self-reflecting onto itself. It contains its own illumination. Like the example of the light bulb. So in a light bulb, it has the little, don't know what you call it, the little sensor inside of the light bulb that causes the photons to be emitted, and then you see light. The Benti is not that. Is not the coil that causes the emission of photons. Benti is the light itself that is self-luminous unto itself. So in the context of quanta or particle physics, it will be the particle itself. So let's take a photon, which is a particle of light. It would be the particle itself that's illuminating, that is spreading light, that is contained light within itself. The spirit being is inseparable from its own spirit essence. Because spirit being and spirit essence is identically, essentially is the same. And so Benti is that aspect of Behudet that is the self-luminous aspect of that Behudet. Thus, he is established and situated within the essence of spirit. So the greens are matching up with the greens from first line, and the yellows are matching up with the yellows, verses 11 and 12. So he's established and situated within the essence of spirit as being spirit itself. Spirit consciousness itself. And thus that spirit consciousness itself is, again, itself that's that spirit consciousness. And therefore, you cannot separate anything from spirit. So now we're going beyond the photon of the quantum physics. Because in quantum physics, you can isolate a photon, which is basically a particle of light. And that particle of light is influenced by perceiving consciousness. So if you perceive it, it appears as a photon, which is a particle. And if you're not perceiving it, it appears as a waveform. So consciousness congeals matter. When we're talking about the self-illumination of spirit, your perceiving consciousness does not form that spirit, because it's beyond the conceptual power of the mind. So it cannot be formed by your mind. So it is its own self-illumination that cannot be formed by perceiving mind from an outside source. It can be formed into objects by its own perceiving mind. It generates its own mind. But you are not going to go with your perceiving mind and do anything to spirit, because your mind is incapable of doing anything to spirit. And therefore, any creation that occurs is a self-creation from within itself. The position being established in the consciousness of higher consciousness. And so so think about this, that consciousness is established within its own higher consciousness. And thus, that higher consciousness is not removable from that higher consciousness. For example, a human being, a normal human being, can be feeling relaxed and all enlightened one day, and the next day they feel irritable and anxious and frustrated. And so the normal human being can be as a barometer, can fluctuate, can go up and down. And that Behudet consciousness does not do that. It is stable within its own higher nature consciousness self. It is stable within that higher consciousness. And you discover your own better nature when you become stable in that higher consciousness. Because like is known by like. Water mixes with water. And so if you mix with spirit and you become established in that higher consciousness, then you are Behudet. You are Heru Behudet. So being established in higher consciousness. But the point they're illustrating here is that the consciousness of spirit cannot be denatured or denuded or taken away from or brought down or caused to become polluted or impure or anything of the sort. Impurity is a human problem. It's a problem of human beings and animals and human animals. It's not a problem of spirit. So the problem with life is not with spirit. The problem of life is with human nature. And that higher consciousness, you cannot touch it. You cannot break it apart. You cannot separate it. You cannot reflect it into parts. The only thing that you can do with it is become one with it. That's all you can do. And of course, to do that, you have to have a strong, powerful mind that has been seasoned through the practice of meditation, and meditative practice. The consciousness of spirit self, and this is he, is established, put a comma here. This is he, is established in the realm of all encompassing self. And that's what we're just referring to, is that the consciousness of spirit is established in the all-encompassingness of itself. So that higher consciousness is, encompasses its own all-encompassing self. And therefore, there's no part of it, there's no aspect of it that is without spirit consciousness. And saying like that, there can be no aspect of it except in its reflective forms. Then they become aspects of each other. Like we're talking about with Sopar and Heru and Asar, they're aspects. But in a transcendental sense, there can be no aspect of transcendental nature. You follow? There can be aspects of the divine within the realm of creator divinities, cosmic divinities, human divinities. But within itself, there's no aspect of itself because it is full. It's like the Mahert, the mighty fullness. So think about it. If it's full, there's no room for anything to go in there and demarcate it, or call it to make it to become segmented. Think about how it is when you bake a cake. When you bake a cake, you have a full cake, and then you have to cut it. And to cut the cake, there has to be some space between the cake and the knife. And if you don't have space, you make space between the cake and the knife. The point is, space is being made for you to make a cut, an incision in the cake. But spirit is full, so you can't cut into it, cannot separate it, you cannot turn it onto anything you cannot turn it anything, you cannot turn it into anything on your will. Is all encompassing. And the spirit consciousness of itself is all encompassing within itself. Hence its self-illumination. A form of Benti, now we're talking about, now that the henotheism is coming through now. A form of Benti is that form of Heru Behudet that receives creator spirit in adorations, the spirits of the dawn. And this is a principle that is inundated with the new arising of spirit consciousness. And what this means is that, again, another difficult concept to put in English. So the Benti in its form of Heru Behudet. Now we're bringing it out of this amorphous higher consciousness kind of position, ascertainment, to now speak about it in this form of a henotheistic principle concept with relation to Heru Behudet. So now Benti is a form of Heru Behudet that receives creator spirit. So what that means is that Heru Behudet is, put it like, open to spirit from from his principal essence of being Heru Behudet. So because he's Heru Behudet, he receives creator spirit, meaning he received the consciousness of creator spirit. And that consciousness of creator spirit is, as you will see later, is what gives him the power to face off against Set. So Heru Behudet, Benti in the form of Heru Behudet, means that there's a dawning of a higher spirit consciousness that leads to a Heru Behudet all-encompassing consciousness cell. So it's kind of difficult to put into English words. So Remen establish Ra. So being established in the spirit. Penu, when to be in existence, and Ra, to be in existence of Ra. So the spirit is within the existence of Ra as the spirit consciousness is being infused within Bedet as the receptacle or the receiver of that higher consciousness that now becomes that consciousness of Heru Behudet. Thus, Benti is the solar principle of Heru Behudet. Thus, again, Benti Heru Behudet is a consciousness of rising spirit inundating the mind. So if spirit now is inundating the mind is being illuminated by that spirit. And so what you have is spirit mind. So you don't just have mind. You have spirit manifesting as mind. If you have spirit manifesting as mind, then you have spirit consciousness. If you have spirit consciousness, then you have your Heru Behudet consciousness that essentially, because of its self-illuminating essence, then diffuses the principles of egoism. Thus, Benti Heru Behudet is a consciousness of rising spirit. Thus, Benti Heru Behudet, this is known as Benti Heru Behudet, is known as in this mind. For this personality is embraced. So he's being embraced. So here's Benti from the Aunt Dua text, Division 2. What it looks like. Sitting down is the baboon-faced divinity. And here's the temple of Amun at Luxor. It's commonly referred to as the Luxor Temple. And at the Luxor Temple, you have the facing pylons. Then you have the obelisk. The other one has been removed. It's now in Paris. And I'll make it larger. So you can see the tall obelisk. And these are the facing pylons of the temple. And here you can see 4 baboon divinities. And these are the spirits of the dawn. Then they receive the morning sun. So that's what we're saying, the reception of that new illuminating spirit being infused in Behudet, which relates to this higher consciousness emerging within your personality. So a growth in spiritual consciousness, or a development, positive development in spirit consciousness. But the big takeaway from line 12 is that this higher consciousness is self-illuminating, and it's essentially inseparable from itself. Verse 13, so being embraced, his personality is embraced. Ra, Jed F, and Heru Behudet. Ra and Ke, Areru. Herd, Mu, Nemet, Bird, Sehetet. Her, Hetep Ab, Arat, Herd S. Ra said he to Heru Behudet, mouth, though metals. Of water, go forth, adorn, cause, placidity, Arat, personality, cause. So being embraced by Ra, that is to say that spirit consciousness as Heru Behudet. Thus, Heru Behudet is manifesting as spirit consciousness to engage with the enemies of Set. Heru Behudet is as Ra, the consciousness of spirit. Ra has said to Heru Behudet, as to thou, collect your grapes and their seeds. The term grapes areru. And this is figurative language. They don't really mean grapes. It's a metaphor. Kareru, so your grapes and their seeds, thus the primordial constitutes that which sustains and nourishes your fortitude from within unobjectified consciousness. The primordial and go forth being adorned in placid, peaceful, and calm mind. As this, the primordial consciousness from which one has obtained one's sustenance, is the causative factor for a calm, peaceful mind. Arat, the serpent goddess, causes. You find out what she causes in verse 14. So, being received by Ra. Being received by Ra means that you're being received, being embraced by Ra, means that you're being embraced, received by that spirit consciousness is enfolding. The spirit consciousness is enfolding, is enwrapping. So this enfolding, you're being, now how would it be, back to the metaphor of light again. How would it be if you were standing in a dark room and, I have a better metaphor. How would it be if you were to walk into the ocean and the entire ocean, you walk deep into the ocean and the entire ocean covers you. You're being enfolded. So Ra is being enfolded in that, Bedet rather, is being enfolded in that spirit consciousness. And by being enfolded within that spiritual consciousness, he manifests as spirit consciousness. Because the point is that, again, that he is essentially that spirit consciousness that is inseparable from itself, that is manifesting as Heru Behudet. And that manifestation of that spirit consciousness, that is what is engaging with the enemies of Set. So spirit consciousness manifesting as Heru Behudet. And that manifestation of Heru Behudet as it is itself consciousness spirit that is sort of, you know how it is. If you're in a dark room and you turn on the light, there's no more darkness. So now that is a true inundation of the darkness. Now is being escapulated, being overtaken by the light. Heru Behudet is as Ra. So what that means is that Ra is on high, and he is spirit. And all of the gods and goddesses come from Ra. So all of the gods and goddesses are manifestations of Ra, and they're actually modes of spirit, aspects of spirit that have manifest as divinities. The point is that Heru Behudet is as Ra, meaning that Heru Behudet is the same consciousness of that spirit. So within the context of this teaching now, what is really going on here is that a consciousness of spirit is what is the antithesis to the ego. So then set is the ego. So think about that. So your own consciousness of spirit is what overtakes your ego. So you're not going to battle your ego by just chanting and meditating and doing postures. And all of that is good. And it's helping to purify and to cleanse your personality and to make you, have you feeling better, healthier, have you feeling more calm and relaxed. Well, what's really going on, what's really going to do the ego in is your own consciousness of spirit, but not your consciousness of spirit coming from a principle of individuation within you, but the conscious awareness of spirit that is an antithesis to the operations of the ego. So don't think of it as, okay, I'm going to think of spirit, think of spirit, think of spirit, and then ego is done. Remember, your mind cannot conceptualize spirit, consciousness. It's too transcendental. So you have to have an awareness of that transcendental spirit, and that is what removes the egoism. Ra has said to Heru Behudet. So now Ra is speaking. So Ra Jedeb. So he's been embraced by Ra, and now Ra is speaking. Ra is saying to him, Ra has said to Heru Behudet, as to thou, collect your grapes and their seeds, thus the primordial constitutes that which sustains and nourishes your fortitude. Let me find a different color for this one. So what it's basically saying is that for grapes, this is figurative language. And since we're talking about grapes, all of this is figurative, areru, that's figurative language, grapes, and what it means is sustenance, areru, A-R-R, and the three circles are the grapes. And what it's really referring to is sustenance, is nourishment. Mu, mu of water. But the water is the primordial ocean, or the state of unobjectified consciousness. Or meaning it is consciousness in an unobjectified state. So to make it more concrete, is matter in an unobjectified state. All the constituents are there, but it's unobjectified. But to be more precise, is consciousness unobjectified. And what it's saying is that within that unobjectified state, that is where you are nourished. That is where you you receive your nourishment and you receive your fortitude. Remember, we were introduced to the principle of denden. And denden means valor. in this context, in this text. So it means to be valorous, to have great courage in the face of danger. And to have that courage, where does that then comes from? Where does that spiritual fortitude and that spiritual courage, where do you get that? And so you have to go into the mu, which is the primordial, and there you find your grapes, your araru, which is your spiritual sustenance that allows you to develop the fortitude and the power and the strength and the capacity for positive spiritual evolution. And then from the areru, bird means to come forth. So you come forth from the areru enfolded, meaning nemet means to be enfolded. So meaning to be adorned. So adorn, to put something on, be enfolded. So you come forth and you are adorned from the primordial. And that causes you the sehetep, which is the cause for the peaceful mind, the mind of placidity and calmness, and deep and profound relaxation. And that placidity and calmness and deep, profound relaxation, it is developed from the mu, and in the mu is where you find your areru. And this verse 13 is a big line. So when we come back next week, we'll probably spend the whole time talking about line 13 alone, because it's very, there are some key terms. And we have to talk more about what the grapes are and where you go to find those grapes, and the metaphysical process and the philosophy behind it. And what does per mean? Here's per. Going forth. What does that mean? Or coming forth. What does that mean? Okay. So we really need 2-hour classes. I'm trying to convince you, but I know Monday is like the beginning of the week. Okay, are there any questions before we sign off? And so we had a big point tonight was the Benti, which is the self-luminous essence of Heru Behudet. So spirit and Behudet is essentially synonymous. All right, there are no questions. We'll do a brief closing hekau, and that'll be it for this evening. Heru makiru, Heru makiru, Heru makiru, Heru makiru. Hetet, dua everyone, until we meet again. Hetet.
Dua Hetet.
Dua Hetet.
Dua Hetet.